Hello, welcome everybody for another edition of 10 Ton Hammer Talks. You guys probably know the drill by now, but if you haven't seen this before, I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy, and he's going to kind of introduce some things, and I'll get us set up.
Alright, so thanks for joining us again for another episode. As I said, you've probably seen this before. If you haven't, get ready for the awesome introduction where we basically plug the site we work for. So, as the name probably implies, we do work for 10tonhammer.com. It's where all of our content goes. We do hope that you enjoy the show and want to help support us and support the good people that employ us. So if you don't already, you should definitely start checking out 10tonhammer.com. It covers a wide variety of games and genres with news, features, guides, editorials, all sorts of good stuff. We have forums that you can contribute on. So yeah, please make sure that you are supporting 10 Ton Hammer in any way possible, because they keep us employed and we get to keep doing this show, and it's good stuff.
Yeah, awesome, and definitely too. All the writing there is pretty good quality. Jeremy and I do a lot with our specific genres, so I kind of focus on MMORPGs, and Jeremy focuses more on esports MOBA. So if you're interested in either of those, there should be some good content there for you. So today's episode, though, I've got it titled "Not So Intellectual Property." I kind of got on this, this train this week of kind of seeing a lot of big franchise stuff happening. Just kind of popped up to my attention. So one of the things that I noticed was with Ep11 Studios, who, if you guys have watched previous episodes, I think it was episode 4, we had Adam Maxwell, developer from Ep11, on because he's working on Revival. Well, that studio just started a game titled Friday the 13th, the game, and it's licensed with the official property. So that was kind of one thing that just triggered the kind of the awareness to me. But I had written an article earlier this week about Sword Coast Legends that was also dealing with some franchise stuff. So this kind of came up to me as a topic that I think that has some value to discuss and see where it leads us. But I wanted to kind of dive into the Friday the 13th game first, and kind of I'm gonna ask Jeremy here and pose a question. Did you see the original Friday 13th movie back in the day? And if you did, what is the most memorable aspect about it?
I am probably one of the 5 people that were alive at that time that didn't see it. So unfortunately, my opinions are not going to be, I guess, quite as intense as we might have hoped. I mean, I'm certainly aware, of the movie and of the Jason Voorhees character and all that.
Let me ask you this then. Since you didn't see it, when you hear, the Friday the 13th thing, and you see the memorabilia or what have you, advertisements out there, what do you automatically kind of assume about that movie, and what do you expect as somebody coming in who has no idea what it's about?
Well, here's the thing, is I know it's certainly one of the most iconic, horror movie franchises that exist. I will say I just learned today, actually, by reading your article, of exactly how many sequels it had. Did not realize it had been that many. But, we know how Hollywood is. Something successful, you're going to keep getting sequels until it's not successful anymore. But, yeah, I mean, based on just the iconic status, you would hope that at the very least it has some level of quality, given how large of an impact it's had as far as horror movies go, on as many people as it has. So, I would expect something of reasonable quality. I expect it to be held to something of a higher standard, just because, of just, saying the name is already, will invoke a lot of, feelings from a lot of people. So, I would say that the bar should be, I would think, pretty high for something that's been around and successful for that long.
Yeah. And, well, it's been a long time since I've watched it as well. Like a very long time. I didn't watch it when it first came out, probably. I'm not even sure what the date was when it was first released, but I was a little tyke, probably too young to watch it. But, yeah, it's just an iconic, it's kind of the epitome of that horror slasher, film that so many films to date have, mimicked in a lot of ways. So It's kind of one of the first films that really set up the idea of, this killer on the loose, killing people that are, supposedly innocent individuals, but may have be participating in questionable things. So, kind of one of the interesting motifs there that is alive in the horror genre pretty heavily. So, yeah, when I see, this game getting franchised by, and one of the interesting things too is this game, the actual director, filmmaker of the Friday the 13th original movie approached the guys at Gun Media when they had first, I think they had first showed it off at an IGN event or something a year ago or something like that. They had been working on a game called Summer Camp. And that's really, and it was like Slasher Volume 1 Summer Camp. They were going to do like a multi-part series, I guess, and they were approached by the creator of the film, who thought it was really reminiscent of that, and then they talked, and eventually they ended up licensing, and now I guess there's going to be like 4 people from the original film working on the game with them. The filmmaker, the producer, the lead producer, the composer, and then the actor who played the original Jason is going to be the motion capture for the guy in the game. So that for people who have watched the movie, it's going to really invoke those same movements and stuff. Should be pretty awesome. But anyhow, when I was looking at this game, I was looking at what the difference is for this particular game, compared to other franchise games. You look at games, it doesn't matter what the genre is, if it's an MMORPG or MOBA or what have you, you have, a popular franchise IP like Lord of the Rings, for example. Was anybody that had anything to do with the creation of, Tolkien's world, any of his, children or anything, had anything to do with half the games that are made in that? I don't even know. But the Friday the 13th game has like 4 of the original creators involved in the process. So I think that's a huge, difference between a lot of franchise, games that enfranchise something do, and I think it should hopefully make it different. So it'll be an interesting one to watch, even for people that don't want to play it at all, have no interest, or haven't watched Friday the 13th. Just seeing how that level of involvement from original creators plays into the success of the game, or how good the quality is, I think is a good indicator of what getting original creators of that IP can do for your product. So that was kind of one thing that just stood out to me, and I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. But the interesting thing is, what they're doing, they're putting a little spin on, a traditional survival horror game experience. But I'm sure they're probably going to include a lot of common elements that we see in survival horror games, and play it safe to some extent, as far as taking an IP and putting it into, a product that works, that sells in the market. On the flip side of kind of this other game I want to talk about a little bit in the beginning of the show here is Sword Coast Legends. Sword Coast Legends is a game basically based on Dungeons and Dragons fantasy realm, one of the Forgotten Realms, one of their fantasy realms for the Wizards of the Coast D&D intellectual property. It's a big one. It's got I don't even know how many books. I know the author that I read a lot of has 30 plus books set in, if not more. I think it's probably closer to 40, set in that specific universe, that specific area of the world, actually. So it's pretty well established. I know he's not the only author who's written in that specific setting. So it's got a big following, and the interesting difference between Sword Coast Legends and Friday the 13th is that while you do have people that helped create the IP in on the project, they're doing something totally unsafe. They're actually trying to attempt to make a game to create a market niche between 2 popular genres of digital RPG and tabletop RPG. So it's really different. Normally you see a popular franchise IP take something and try and plug it into a working business model, the same way we saw WoW basically build its own franchise from the ground up, Warcraft, with Blizzard, and you know they made an MMO in that with that, and it was really successful. And then you see a bunch of other people taking, you know, popular franchise IPs, Star Wars, you know, and just throwing it into an MMO. And a lot of the times they were done in ways that were just played it safe. Star Wars Galaxies was one that I think was different, and it had its ups and downs, you know. So, but anyways, I don't want to dive too far into the details of that, but I kind of want to toss it over to you, Jeremy, and ask you, you know, without having like an in-depth knowledge of the different games I'm talking about and stuff, what would you kind of, I don't know, what's your opinion on games that want to play it safe or want to do something new? Should they be leaning on a franchise to try something new, or should they be taking care of the IP they're playing with? Kind of, I don't know. Speak your thoughts on it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, especially when you're talking about, you know, something that people are already familiar with, just, you know, in concept, you know, like say the Star Wars universe or anything at all like that. So there's two different ways to look at it. You can go the safe route and plug it into, you know, a game formula that you know works, because that way, you know, you can't completely mess up, you know, this universe that people are already in love with. So that's kind of the mindset there of why you would go that way, is to, you know, maybe you can't innovate as much, so you can't do as many cool things, but you can put it into this formula, you know how it works, your audience knows how it works, so they have an idea what to expect. And, you know, sometimes it can be cool to, you know, have a formula that you already like, you know, but, you know, you have it almost reskinned, you know, for whatever, you know, characters and universe that you enjoy. So that's cool. The reason why a lot of times they won't go the risky route is because if they try to do something completely different and the audience doesn't like it, then you didn't just create a game they don't like, you screwed up their universe that they're in love with, and you're going to be hated from now until eternity, you know, for you know, totally misrepresenting whatever universe that we're talking about. So that's the problem with going risky. The advantage to it is that if you do it well, you can create a game that does feel completely unique within that universe, that it almost, for some fans, can almost become like canon in that universe, because it's so different and, you know, so well done that it doesn't feel like just another game in the genre that just happens to be in this universe. It feels like an actual real part of that universe. So that's kind of the risk versus reward of trying to do something different and unique. If you do it well, you'll be loved. If you do it anything less than exceptionally well, you'll be vilified by, you know, a huge number of people. So I think that's why, you know, they'll tend to go the safer route, is, you know, the ceiling might not be as high, but the potential for failure is much lower.
Yeah, the fall is a lot shorter if you don't really get out over the ledge too far. One of the games that immediately kind of came to mind when you were talking about that, you know, a game that maybe takes some risks, you know, and does something a little bit innovative and actually, you know, borders on that, you know, trying to make itself into a part of the canon. I thought of Star Wars: The Force Unleashed, you know, and Star Wars fans, you know, there's a minority out there that probably hate the game because it messes up the canon, you know, and there's those out there that probably love it and think that it would be a great addition to the canon because the game was really well made. It added some new type mechanics that I don't think, you know, had really been done with that franchise before. It was cool to see, you know, a Jedi kind of caught between the dark and the light, which, you know, is something that's been done in the franchise, so it's thematic. But then taking it and kind of blending some of these powers where, you know, you're lighting your lightsaber on, you know, sparking it up with lightning, you know, with Sith lightning, Dark Force lightning. So it was kind of cool to see them starting to innovate and add new things in there, and, you know, take what they understood about the Star Wars universe and really kind of twist it and make something cool and unique and iconic. And the characters were really well done in that as well. You know, I can't remember what his name is. I think he's just kind of nicknamed Starkiller. Darth Vader's secret apprentice was just a really cool story catch to a really cool plot. So it's one of those games that how many other Star Wars games out there were there around that time? I remember playing Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy. A lot of those were good games, but they didn't really take. I don't think they took quite as many risks as far as playing with the canon and playing with the iconography of what a Jedi and Sith are. So I thought that was a game that I just thought of when you were talking, that came to mind. And
yeah, for sure.
But anyways, the next kind of bit on this I want to move on to is, we're talking about games that are taking an IP, or getting a license, or whatever, what have you, however they come across it. They have this responsibility now, and no matter what, I think you're always going to see games, no matter how good they are, you're always going to have the minorities that are just hate it, and
sure, yeah.
No matter what, you're always going to piss off some people. You can't please everyone, but it's interesting to see the game developers and the designers that are willing to kind of take that greater risk and try and bank on that big reward of a iconic game. So I don't know. I think that Friday the 13th, that specific game is kind of taking some interesting things. The element of them doing a 1v7, where it's actually like a 1v1v1, because all the counselors are sort of in a cutthroat mode. They're all trying to survive. They're not actually going to be. They can cooperate to escape, but they just mentioned a couple things about it in the little Kickstarter preview thing, where you've got a couple counselors that like basically everybody, there's different options to escape. Fixing the phone line so that they can call the police, or escaping on a boat by repairing it, and the boat only has 2 seats, so you get 4 people cooperating to fix the boat, and then at the end of it, everybody's on the dock. 2 people can get in, and 2 people have Jason stalking them down the dock, and they're trapped. So it's a really intriguing game. I think that it adds an interesting element and a twist on the movie, that it adds that gaming element in it. So it should be pretty interesting. I think that it's got a lot of potential. Sword Coast Legends is one that I'm more concerned about, because it's doing something extremely daring, and it has the chance to be either really great or just kind of fall incredibly short. There were a lot of good games made with that IP. The Neverwinter games, Baldur's Gate, the Icewind Dale games, all those kind of like little top isometric action RPGs were all really well made, so it's going to be tough to compete with those. So I think that's maybe why they were so daring, and I think that Neverwinter was originally intended to be more like Sword Coast Legends. It just never was able to take those daring steps. So kind of interesting. Anyways, I don't want to keep ranting and getting totally off topic here. I'm actually going to bring my outline back up. So but yeah, so one of the things that I have here to discuss quite a bit today is intellectual properties. Like we talked Friday the 13th, that's a scary IP, it's cool. Sword Coast Legends scares me as an IP because of what they're trying to do with it. But our last section here, I have, we've got intellectual properties that should scare us, or should thrill us, but don't. And I could list tons of them, but I could open up with Lord of the Rings Online. It's a well-made game, high quality. It had the budget, but it just doesn't feel like it does anything meaningful with that IP. So when you're looking at an IP like that, is there a reason to take that IP and try to do and use it if you're not going to actually do anything with it? And I think that's an argument to be made. And I'll pass over to you, Jeremy. What do you think about games that I understand playing the safe route, but does a game developer have any business taking an IP or using an IP if they're not actually going to do anything meaningful with it, other than just pull in profits?
Well, I think the way you phrased your question was spot on. Do they have any business doing it? Yeah, it's all about the business. That's why they're doing it, and it's it seems like a simplistic answer, but it's really the reality of the situation. They're doing it because if it has a big time name on it, people are going to buy it. It doesn't matter what's in the game. they're going to do it. Now, with that said, it is a bit subjective, you know. Again, we talked about, for any game, some people are going to love it, some people are going to hate it, so there might be some people that play the game and get what they want out of it. Maybe they weren't looking for anything, hugely innovative or that's going to change their perspective of the universe, but that just allows them to explore what they already know for a while, and that doesn't really change anything. And for those people, probably delivered exactly what they would have wanted. So in that sense, maybe what they did was fine. So I guess it depends really what you're looking to get out of the game. I mean, obviously, in any form of entertainment, TV, movies, games, whatever, there's always going to be just using the name of something that's well known to just put something out and make money off of it. Like, that will happen, and I'm sure that's the case for some of, these types of things that you're talking about. But as I said, it might just be a matter of that. Because, like, here's my thing. This is what I was kind of thinking about a little bit earlier in our discussion, is when you play any game that has any sort of customization, either within the game or third-party mods or whatever, how often do you see people recreating, just characters or things from different universes that have nothing to do with the current game that you're playing? And it happens a lot, right? Like, in MMOs, people try to, create their characters to look like, characters from other games. I know I've done it. And even in a game like League of Legends, for example, there's third-party mods that will allow you to make characters look like characters from other games. Now, why do you do this? It's not, adding anything to, the universe of the character, that you're basically reskinning, but you just get to feel, you get to just experience, your character outside of the game they were already in. And for some people, like, that's enough. That you just like experiencing that universe as much as possible, even if it's not actually adding anything to it. And for a lot of people, that in and of itself is an enjoyable experience. So taking that IP and as you said, like, not doing anything with it, not furthering the universe, no, it may not be, and maybe they could have done more, but just doing that and just creating a new experience, even if you're not furthering the story or messing with the canon or doing anything, and just allowing them to experience that same universe they already know, just outside of where they're used to it, or just in a new game or whatever, for a lot of people, that in and of itself can just be enjoyable.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think, maybe it's like my background in comics, always seeing, authors or, new artists and authors, writers, taking what it is, taking what's there and trying to continually moving it forward. And just, I guess I look at, I don't know, I guess with games being more of an interactive experience, sometimes it is just enough for, providing players with, a universe they love to play around in, whether it's an action game or an RPG or what have you, just enjoying that. So I definitely see that there is room for that to be used that way. I guess I would agree with that because, even if I can only count like the number of Star Wars games I loved on my, one hand, I'm really grateful there were a lot of Star Wars games to play, so that is a fair argument. And Terradin asked me to kind of like define what I meant by meaningful earlier, which I think you kind of answered for me. Meaningful in such a way that you're actually doing something with the canon with it, like actually adding to it or progressing it or, peeking into the depth of it, maybe exploring some things, some elements that they didn't have time to in books or movies to maybe explore certain routes or specific side characters, things like that. So I think that's kind of what I was talking about, and you kind of explained that pretty good. Gosh, got something in my throat. I'll have to drink some water here in a minute. The last section I kind of want to discuss a little bit is building an IP from the ground up. So, I mean, lots of games have done it. Lots of developers have taken, their own ideas and built franchises out of them. And I'm going to pass over to you first, just because, for one, I need to drink water. But for two, I think you're more of a Blizzard expert than I am, as far as there are several games over there that are esports. related games. And I don't know how much of StarCraft or Warcraft you played growing up, any of the RTSs or anything like that, but um, can you talk a little bit about why Blizzard feels like a franchise to you? Maybe just even if they're just totally obvious, point out some elements that, you know, make it a franchise in your eyes.
So here's what Blizzard does. To answer your quick question, I played not like competitively, but I played a lot of the first StarCraft and really got into StarCraft 2. Just came out so much later. Like my interests had changed a bit at that time. Anyone who knows me knows how big of a fan of Diablo I have always been. I have played just an insane amount of all three Diablo games, plus expansions, obviously. So the thing about Blizzard is this: what they do is they don't necessarily start a genre, they don't create a genre, but what they do is they are very good at jumping on a genre early enough that for the casual fan they might almost feel like Blizzard did create it, because they jump on it when someone else has the pieces in place, and then they do an excellent job of taking those pieces and using the Blizzard budget, I guess, to create something bigger and also very accessible. And I think that's honestly the biggest thing that has kept Blizzard so successful for so long is their accessibility. Like, you look at WoW and you talk to anybody who doesn't know much about MMOs and ask them to name an MMO, 99% probably WoW is going to be the first one they're able to come up with. Why? Because it's just so permeated into our society now, even outside of, like, the gaming culture. It's so well known, and if anybody is like, I wonder if I should play an MMO for like the first time, WoW's probably going to be the first one they at least look at, because Blizzard's done such a good job of making it able to just so many people. You look at a more recent example of Hearthstone. Card games have been around forever. But the realm of digital card games is actually something that still hasn't been done very well. Like, I have several friends that are very much into Magic the Gathering. The Magic the Gathering online has a lot that is left to be desired. So Hearthstone comes in, and, certainly not, creating the genre of collectible card games. It's been around forever. But they realize there's a space for a completely online card game that is accessible to a wide audience because it's easy to pick up, hard to master, which is the kind of recipe, I think, for success for a game long term, especially for any sort of competitive game. And they realized that there was a space for this, that there was demand for, but that wasn't being completely met. So they did it, and then to double dip, it's based on the Warcraft franchise. So while they've already found a space that needed something like Hearthstone, they then double dip by putting the Warcraft name on it, so everybody wants to play it, even people that weren't necessarily going to play card games before. So Blizzard just does a really, really good job of knowing where there is space to grow in any particular genre, knowing how to make it both accessible and appealing to a very wide audience. I think more so than a lot of other games. Just to give a quick anecdote, I don't know how much this will mean to people, but I'm also a big fan of poker. And one of the most well-known domestic poker players is this guy Daniel Negreanu. He's one of the most successful poker players of all time. I'm going to say recently, probably early this year, picked up Hearthstone. Keep in mind, this is a guy who's been playing poker for years and years, has made millions and millions of dollars off of it. He has said that Hearthstone is literally his favorite game in the world, more so than poker. And this is a guy that isn't a big gamer or anything. He never has been before, but got into Hearthstone. This guy that is set financially for life. Loves the game of poker, plays it all the time. It's just that he actually likes Hearthstone better. And that he goes to sleep thinking about Hearthstone and dreams about Hearthstone. You don't get that with a lot of other things, but Blizzard just has this way of creating games that can permeate our society and just I guess just become bigger than a lot of other companies do. Now, this isn't just meant to be, hey, let's compliment Blizzard for an hour, kind of segment, but it's something that if your goal is to get to as wide an audience as possible, like the way Blizzard has done it is more effective than I think almost any other company. They find that space where there's demand, and then they figure out a way to make it just as available to a wide as audience as possible. So like it's not to say that everything they do is perfect, because no one is, and sure they make mistakes. But if your question is, why has Blizzard been able to do this and to create these titles that everybody knows about, even if they don't play them, that's how they've done it.
Yeah, I think Blizzard is a really interesting entity because they started with the Warcraft games, just creating this tiny little idea in the RTS space, and it kind of grew into a little franchise, and then they basically took that franchise and pasted it onto, World of Warcraft was definitely different than EverQuest and some of the other earlier MMORPGs, but they made a few adjustments to fit the type of feel they were looking for to make that type of game more accessible to a wider audience, and they basically put the burgeoning franchise of Warcraft on it, and now it's a juggernaut franchise. Now Warcraft, they can put it on a game like Hearthstone that, for all intents and purposes, if Hearthstone had different IP, how many people would be playing it? Like maybe people would because of Blizzard's success, but that IP really drew a lot of people in that maybe would never have tried a trading card game, just not into that. So, and they're continuing to build this franchise as well. Hearthstone now is just further growing this giant Warcraft franchise, and the interesting thing is, Blizzard had success with this. StarCraft could possibly have been equally successful for this if they applied it in the same way that they did with the Warcrafts. Could have been equally. I know there's just as many sci-fi fans out there as fantasy fans, if not more. Who knows?
Yeah,
so it's interesting that they didn't use that, and I kind of look at it. When you look at they had Diablo running at the same time too, and another fantasy-esque title. Now they're actually paying attention to their kind of deficiency here in this sci-fi realm, and you see Overwatch coming out, more of a sci-fi theme, kind of this contemporary, science fiction universe. This new, I think it's a new IP, their first new IP in a while, I would say, at least one that's been touted kind of this big. So it's going to be interesting because they do have a lot of experience in growing an IP, establishing it, and then actually using it to put on products and put on other business models in other realms of gaming and profit off it. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Overwatch, if it's the beginning of a franchise or if it's just kind of a one-shot wonder type thing. And that's not really how Blizzard operates. They tend to use the IP that works. So it'll be interesting. But one thing that I do want to note about Blizzard is a little bit, like I've been saying a lot of good things about them. Jeremy has as well, but I wonder if the franchise is getting too watered down as well. I see, the benefits of applying it to a totally new game type to spice things up, to spice up the Warcraft franchise by putting it in, because if you just take the Warcraft franchise without Hearthstone, I think it feels like it was getting watered down through the expansions of World of Warcraft and no real innovation, and it actually needed something like Hearthstone to rejuvenate it. And another game franchise that I thought of when you were talking about Blizzard earlier was the God of War franchise. Also a really popular one, and that one's kind of interesting because just in one game they were able to kind of establish a miniature little franchise with that, because what they did with that game, I recently watched episode from some guys, Extra Credits. I absolutely love them. I've mentioned them before. You guys should check them out. But they did an episode on no redeeming value, and they used the God of War franchise specifically and talked about how they use the elements that are in classic Greek tragedies and they basically made a game of that for God of War 1 and did that with his story, with Kratos' story, and just established this character that you just attached yourself to. It was just the character came through in everything he did, the way his animations were, his motivations, everything. It was great, and the story was awesome. And then they kind of took that franchise and just carried it forward, but didn't really carry the meaningful part of the story forward, where, yeah, they're creating a new plot and everything, but it actually wasn't, the player wasn't doing the same things they were doing in the first game. They weren't exploring more about who Kratos is, and they weren't coming to a type of conclusion. They even point out, you know, in the last game, God of War 3, sorry, spoilers here, but
Actually, let me jump in real quick before
Yeah.
you do that.
Go ahead.
Two things. So one, if you say Kratos instead of Kratos one more time, I'm gonna come find you. And secondly, I will say on that note before you spoil, and maybe you don't, is I absolutely loved God of War. Played a ton of the first game, played a ton of the second game. When they came out with the HD remakes, they came out, well, let me look at my collection real quick, make sure that I'm not getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay, so they came out with the, I think they came bundled together, God of War 1 and 2 HD. Played through all of them. While I'm usually not an achievement/trophy type of person, I got on the PlayStation, I got all the trophies, you know, in the first and second one, like, loved those games. I have started up God of War 3, like, I want to say 3 different times now, and I haven't gotten past, like, the first couple of scenes or something, like the first couple of, like, play scenes, to say. Like, I've played almost none of that game, and I don't even know why. And maybe that is why, you know, maybe, you know, over time, like, it is harder to feel that same connection that you felt with the first game. But yeah, I've played almost none of God of War 3, despite playing through both of the first 2 games multiple times.
Yeah, and see, I was a big God of War fan too. I played the first and second one all through, also multiple times. I think the first one a lot more than the second. But when I got to the third one, I think I did play it out and finish it out completely, because I do remember when I watched the extra credits thing when they talked about the end or spoiler. I remembered that, so I think I did finish it all the way through. But the fact that it was that forgettable was pretty sad, you know, considering how much I enjoyed the franchise. And even though I mispronounced the guy's name terribly, but yeah, it was a great franchise, but they let it get watered down because they didn't maintain a commitment to the meaningful character in the story. You know, they just kind of took the franchise and said, you know, we can make money off this, let's make a new game. And, you know, that's kind of what they did with God of War 3. And it just wasn't the same. And the last choice, I mean, you didn't get a choice in the end of the game. It felt like, it's interesting because in God of War, even though you're kind of making choices, you're really just following a predetermined course for Kratos and figuring out, you know, what's going to happen to him. In the third one, same thing, except you really don't feel like it's important, or that you kind of were drawn into it. You didn't make any choices, or maybe you didn't agree with the choices he was making. I think is a big difference there, because he just wasn't operating, you know, true to his nature, or there wasn't any meaning, you know, behind his decision. So, anyways, the whole point of that, tangent, was to kind of beat into this fact that, you know, establishing a good franchise, you know, building a franchise from nothing requires good characters, like extremely good characters. The original Warcraft, you know, game, if anybody remembers it, there was a lot of little details, you know, even your little peon characters, you know, you keep clicking them and they start saying funny things. With StarCraft, they started implementing these heroic type characters, you know, like Jim Raynor, and you start getting these characters that actually make the game more memorable and the whole franchise more memorable. And Blizzard did a great job with that. You know, I don't think they're actually that great of character development. I don't think Blizzard has great character development as far as, like, really attaching people. And, you know, maybe that's not their goal. But the point is, I think great character and good character design is important to growing a franchise. I mean, when you think about any huge franchise that you love, it really is because of a character. You know, Kratos with God of War, Jason with Friday the 13th. That's a really iconic character. With me personally, with Sword Coast Legends, you know, reading 30 plus books of The Legend of Drizzt is, you know, he's the character that I attach to in that. Well, there are more, but it's all about the characters, and I think that you have to have those to kind of make a franchise meaningful. So I'm going to kind of, like, go back to like Lord of the Rings and some of these other MMORPGs that I've kind of briefly mentioned, Star Wars and stuff like that, those could be great games. I just think that you really have to do a good job with the characters in those to make them memorable to the players or make them meaningful. You know, maybe you don't even necessarily do anything with the canon, like I was saying. You know, you don't take it anywhere, but if you have good characters in that IP universe, I think that's kind of the recipe for success there. And I think a lot of people don't really take the time to do that. It seems like I don't know. Maybe that's just me thinking, you know, off the armchair here, but yeah, it just seems I've seen it done in some Star Wars games and not done in others. Lord of the Rings, I haven't really. I mean, I would say, what's the game that just came out relatively recently? The one where you're the, you know, the ranger and you've got the elf spirit and you're assassinating the goblin leaders. I can't think of the name of it right now, but that was a great game because of the character and the mechanics were established in that universe. Whereas you compare that to like the dearth of other games in the Tolkien universe, and not too many of them are memorable. So, and that one probably had the most focus on character I'd seen, because it was also a new, unique character. It wasn't kind of rehashing, you know, the people of the Fellowship, you know, and stuff like that. So, anyways, I'm gonna stop ranting and let you jump in with something with something here.
Something. I mean, can you get back to
Shadows of
specific?
Mordor. Dorkish called out the name. Yeah, Shadows of Mordor. Yeah, sorry. So I'll take us back, like totally on topic here. You know, building a franchise from the ground up. If you see a game that's not really taking character seriously, maybe, you know, it's a game to be careful about, I think. And which is probably another reason that I'm kind of concerned about Sword Coast Legends, because, you know, and we'll have to wait until the Head Start access finishes. I think this week is the last week before it launches, something like that. And you actually get the campaign mode, and we'll get to see how, you know, players can develop their characters, and if there's other interesting NPCs that make the world kind of come to life and be a memorable experience in the Sword Coast of the Forgotten Realms. But yeah, I think it's a real recipe for success, and I don't know, I'll just kind of pitch it over to you, Jeremy. Can you think of any games, any great, you know, franchise IP-based games that haven't really had good character, you know, or where the character wasn't really important to its success or not?
Well, I think there's always going to be some level of importance of character. I think it's be hard to say they're not important at all, but I think that maybe what can be done, and I don't know why all we do is talk about Blizzard in this segment, but I'm going to go back to it, because what Blizzard has done is there's some character development, but you said yourself, it's not, you know, the best you've ever seen.
It's not.
But what they do is create a world, and I think you almost identify with the world itself more than you do any individual character, because said, like, I played a bunch of StarCraft 1, I know who Jim Raynor is, I know who Arcturus Mengsk is, but if you ask me for incredibly detailed accounts of their stories, I probably can't give them to you. Now, part of it is just because it's been a long time since I played the game, but even so, even though I can't remember all sorts of specifics about them, I remember the world, and I remember the feeling of conflict and of betrayal and of having to fight this alien force, you know, while at the same time dealing with, you know, internal conflicts of interest, you know, and espionage and betrayal and all that kind of stuff. So even if I don't remember everything about the characters, I have that just general overall feeling, you know, of what the world brought. And like in Diablo, there's a few main characters, you know, Deckard Cain is probably the most prominent. But outside of that, a lot of it is even just almost Easter eggs, you know, they might mention a character real quickly, like, oh, I remember that from the other game. You know, but it's the feeling of the world, of the Diablo universe that I think you associate with more so than, maybe more than a couple different characters, you know, not enough to fully populate a world, you know, so there's a few that maybe, you know, you're really into, but that's about it. So I think actually some of the Blizzard games are good examples of it, that you need to have some connection with the characters, but you can actually still build up an IP without huge levels of character development if you're placing them in a world that the player wants to be a part of, and, you know, can associate themselves, I guess, more with the world than with the individual characters. That's, I guess, just a different way that you can go about it that can still be massively successful.
Yeah, that's interesting that you actually were talking about kind of that specific end of it. More talking about the plot, the tension, the feel of the story. It's kind of interesting because when you consider writing, the profession of writing for fiction authors, the saying goes you typically have a character-oriented author or a plot-oriented author. There some authors do both well, but usually you see one that's better at one than the other. And it's kind of interesting because I think games are an interactive, story that you're participating in. Even an MMORPG, which is probably, why a lot of MMORPGs today feel so static and bland, because you're not feeling like you're actually interacting with the story, even though, your character is made the center point of it. It doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel like you're actually changing, making an impact in the story, or getting to experience the tension of the story through your character. Or getting to know any iconic characters that really you get to understand them through your gameplay. So you don't get plot or character in a lot of MMORPGs today, and other games that do really well, it seems like they have one or the other. They either have great characters, they have a great plot and a great feel about them. It can't simply just be. I guess what it's all like curving back around to for me personally is that you can't take an intellectual property or a franchise and not do something with it as far as characters or plot. I feel like there has to be some meaning to the experience, other than just throwing a game together in this universe and letting people play it. I get that some games can be enjoyable that way, like maybe I saw some people mention in chat way earlier X-Wing Fighter and stuff like that. Those are good because those are more of like an action combat those play to the simulator crowd. And that's fine to take, the Star Wars universe and put it into a fighter simulator. But I think when you're talking about games that revolve around characters and plot, RPGs, any type of story-based thing, you have to have one or the other that's good, regardless of what your mechanics are, or what great ideas you have for cool mechanics. Like those things, I think you have to have at least one of them. If you don't have at least one of them, I think the majority feel of response of the game is going to be negative, just because it just doesn't feel like it fits in the universe. If you can't make it fit in the universe, I just don't think you should make one in the universe. I guess that's kind of what I'm curving around to. Was not actually the intent of this episode. I just kind of really wanted this episode to talk things out and figure out, what does franchising mean, to me as a player, and what do I expect from games that are taking big franchises and making them into games, or taking unknown concepts and building them into franchises.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good way to look at it. You want something more than just, hey, look, we have the name of this franchise on the game. You want something that makes you feel like, in one way or another, whether it's in a super deep way or in a shallow way, but one way or another, that at least the game should feel like it could be part of that universe somehow.
Yeah, I think anytime you're touching into an IP or franchise of something, the expectations from your players are going to get altered regardless in some way. I think it's just the nature of the beast. And you can look at games too that have built their franchises. Just to stay off the Blizzard track, I'll pop over to League of Legends. Has really established itself a franchise because they've taken they made iconic characters, and now even internally, you can internally have expectations. When Riot Games creates a new champion for League of Legends, based on the previous, level of champions that have already been made, players have expectations that, these new champions need to fit. Yeah, a lot of times players even feel like they need to fit with the lore, even though the lore is a very, very tiny, almost additional part of that game that's not even really consequential to the gameplay experience.
They're trying to work on all that. They've made some steps, but I agree. And so like that's where we're going to look more at the feel of the world as a whole, rather than latching onto a few main characters. And you'll see like people have their characters that they love in that game, despite at best, a few paragraphs or so of description. There's people that they'll latch onto the characters and they'll love those characters with all their heart. But you're probably not going to get that without a world that they feel like they're part of. So yeah, I think it's a great example of how you can kind of go in either direction and still create attachment for the players.
Now, an interesting question I'll throw at you, Jeremy, is staying on the same topic, League of Legends, since you're pretty ingrained into that game.
That one I
like
got,
myself.
yeah.
Let's say that Riot Games kind of goes the Blizzard route of, okay, we built ourselves a franchise here, we built ourselves an intellectual property. Let's apply this to another gaming venture business model that is successful in the industry. What type of game, what genre would you like to see League of Legends lore or that universe or that IP branded onto? There's no wrong
I will
answer.
say to start out, while I consider that question, the company is called Riot Games, but is currently realistically Riot Game. But they are actually working on creating other games. They said that their goal is to have other games both in and out of the League of Legends universe. They have been very tight-lipped about any details beyond that. So what could work? I would imagine some level of role-playing game could work, whether it be an MMO or a single-player experience, just because they do have this world that while the gameplay doesn't focus on it, there is actually a fair bit of detail in that world that could easily be expanded on to make a more story-driven game. I think that would probably be the most logical route, just because the pieces are in place. They said you have to flesh it out more, but the pieces are in place there to do something along those lines, a more story-driven game. So I think that would probably be the logical step if you do want to keep it within the League of Legends universe.
Yeah, I think one thing that is interesting about the way Warcraft kind of grew and built is they had a game in a competitive type environment that had some lore to it, but hadn't really been expanded upon. And World of Warcraft really took that and expanded upon it and created it into a meaningful story experience where players can play and take part in the world rather than just competing against other players in the coolness of the world and the fantasy and the lore and stuff like that, which I think is what League of Legends is exactly. It's you're competing in this really cool world with really cool characters, and there's a lot of cool things about it. I'm actually shocked that they haven't. I'm sure they've probably started expanding. Well, definitely with the way we've seen the change in characters and champions that they've produced recently, there's an obvious huge expansion of lore that they're doing behind the scenes, I think, for just to accommodate that. But I'm sure they're already working on something to fill a different audience, because I don't think you really want to take a game like, imagine if Warcraft they'd had their RTS and they decided to make an arena fighter game out of it. Yeah, you're going to expand to a little bit of a new audience, but you may be running into competition with yourself, with already players that are looking for a competitive experience and they already like the one game. So yeah, answering a totally different audience I think is the right way to go. So seeing a company as successful and well budgeted as Riot Games pursue something in the story related industry is exactly what I would want them to do as well. I think that was a good call, kind of leaning that way, because they have all the pieces, and if we are going to consider Blizzard kind of like this ideal model to follow, that would probably be successful if anybody else followed it in a similar way with their own creative good experiences, good solid gameplay mechanics and an interesting world. I think anybody could follow that model and do well. So yeah, I think it's interesting that so many studios kind of look at World of Warcraft and try to copy this one big money maker, instead of looking at the whole progression and seeing how Blizzard achieved that. So
Right, it didn't just start out with WoW being this monster game all on its own. There was definitely a process for sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep, and I think that Riot Games has that same kind of potential. I've said it a lot of times, but I guess I didn't even really know what that meant. I didn't knew. Gosh, my words are not working. I didn't understand what I meant, kind of, or what I was thinking when I felt that before. But now I think I do. That we've talked this out, and I think it's a really interesting facet of gaming. You know, as gaming becomes more mainstream, which is something we talked about a lot last episode. If you guys haven't seen that one, you know, franchises, these gaming franchises are going to get bigger. You know, are going to be more in the spotlight. So you're going to see more IPs outside of gaming come into gaming. You're going to see more gaming IPs start to go elsewhere. You know, there's already the talk of the Warcraft movie, and there are games that are becoming movies more and more common, especially with a lot of, you know, advancements in CG. It's a lot easier to take a really interesting fantasy sci-fi game experience and start turning it into a movie. So definitely a lot of crossover in entertainment, and I think it's an exciting time for people who are fans of games and people who are fans of, you know, big franchise entertainment that they've enjoyed, you know, in any realm of entertainment. So, but anyways, yeah, to not rant on you guys all day, we are getting towards the very end here, and I think I've about just destroyed our outline completely with a lot of tangents and stuff, but I think we hit everything. So, yeah, I'll go ahead and just, you know, content coming up this week on 10 Ton Hammer. I'm actually going to hit my column before the end of the week today, probably later this afternoon, so you guys can look for something interesting there. I'm going to be talking kind of about buying into game, kind of the people having to pay to participate in gaming communities is kind of something I've also noticed this past week, but I haven't got the chance to talk about. So look for that, and of course I'll be posting some news and stuff, and anything Daybreak Games related, and Revival, and those, you know, games in my wheelhouse that I always talk about and bring up. Expect to hear from me on those, and maybe a few new titles I'm checking out as well. So that's it for me upcoming on 10 Ton. Jeremy, you can go ahead and share what you've got and then close us out.
Yeah, so what I have done, and also, since we opened with Support 10 Ton Hammer, let's close with Support 10 Ton Hammer. Also, we do have a Patreon page. You can either find it with Patreon 10 Ton Hammer, or you can just get to it from the main site. But a piece of content that I did put up on our Patreon site, only available to our patrons, so, you know, give us your money and all that, is, you know, the need for having someone or something outside of yourself to blame when playing a competitive game. Kind of delved pretty deep, actually, into the psychological aspects of that. So yeah, I encourage you to check that out if you are a patron, or if you're not, you know, go do that thing. Other than that, I did put up a new Diablo 3 video guide. Done a few of those. Those are available for everybody, not just on the Patreon. So you definitely encourage you to check those out. I'll be working on a new one as well. This will be, of course, dependent upon in-game drops. I'm sure you can all understand the pain that can sometimes be associated with that. Dorkish, you can give us whoever's money you want. I won't question where it comes from or how you got it. Just, you know, do it. That's fine. Yeah. But yeah, you know, other than that, you know, come back, hang out with us again next week. Every week, you know, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays. I can't say too much yet because it's not 100% confirmed. It's like 90% right now. But we should be having someone from the development team of an upcoming game next week. Again, I'm not going to promise that. I'm not also going to give any details yet because it's not 100% guaranteed. But I'm talking to them right now. It looks like it should happen. So I'm actually pretty excited. It's going to be a game that's going to be completely new to both Alex and myself. We're going to be experiencing it hopefully for the first time next week. So yeah, I'm actually pretty excited. So I won't give any details right now just in case it doesn't happen. But it should be pretty cool if they do come on. So, you know, join us next week, and we'll tweet out about it before then once it is confirmed for sure. So looking forward to it.
Yes, he's not overhyping. If it does happen, it will be a pretty cool subject to talk about and a cool guest. So tune in next week, find out if that happens or not. Because even if it doesn't, we will prepare something pretty fun for you guys. So thanks for participating in the discussion. You guys were pretty awesome in chat, keeping things going there and bringing up some great points. So we always look forward to more. Thank you guys, and we will see you next Friday at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, for another 60 minutes of fun. Take it easy.
All right. See you guys then.